Hey guys, just before the episode starts, we just wanted to give a little trigger warning because we will be talking about sexual assault, sexual coercion, sexual harassment, and all things of that nature. So if that's going to trigger you, upset you, annoy you, make you feel any type of way, then yeah, just turn it off and catch us on Tuesday with our usual content. If you have experienced any of these things, or you feel like you want to or you need to talk to someone, then there are support lines, and there's a 24/7 confidential victim support line, which is UK based, and the number for that is 0808 1689 111. We love you guys. Stay safe.
Welcome back to Sextras,
where we talk about sex and all the extras.
I'm Honey.
And I'm Maria. And we don't have fun facts for you because it's a bonus app, so you know things are going a little bit less conventional, so
a little bit less fun.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, we wanted to talk a little bit about our thoughts, just kind of about everything that's been going on in terms of sexual assault and people speaking out about that on the internet a lot and in protests in the UK at least, and I know there's stuff happening around the world as well, but I think it's important to just acknowledge it and kind of give our little opinion if it might help someone. You know, obviously we are a sex and relationships podcast, so we can't really talk about sex and relationships without acknowledging the bad stuff that comes with that. I mean, I think we do a lot in terms of other stuff, but we haven't spoken that much about sexual assault, so
yeah. Well, I think like after Sarah Everard's death and sort of all the stuff that started popping up online, like kind of all the activism and I guess like everyone speaking out and loads of people sharing their personal stories and stuff like that, and I don't know, Honey, we kind of had a moment of, we're not together so we didn't actually physically look at each other, but you know when you just like look at each other and just had a moment of like, oh, I feel like, should we post something about this, like I feel like we should say something, what should we do? We were like, yeah, I don't know. And to be honest, like this has like led to a whole other conversation just between us about like activism and Instagram and like what is like what we should speak about, what we shouldn't speak up about, or not even shouldn't or should. It's like
what's helpful
yeah, I don't know,
to the conversation.
And that's a whole other conversation. That's not the conversation that we necessarily want to have today, but I don't know, just kind of to fill you guys in on the thought process behind the bonus episode.
And also the thing is that neither of us have specifically experienced sexual assault that we would name it that, but we wanted to kind of talk about, you know, other things that we have witnessed and things that we have experienced that could fall under kind of the bracket of sexual coercion, and that can all contribute to rape culture and sexual assault. And yeah,
well, that's the other thing as well. Like I've had a few people be like, you guys should do an episode on sexual assault, and even we've from the start said we should do an episode on that, but it's kind of something that we actually want to do well and like talk about it with someone that we're like, oh yeah, this would be a good person to talk about it with, or I don't know, we've planned a really good episode. And with a lot of these things about like activism and what we should and shouldn't speak up about, it's like I've been thinking, and it's kind of like there's a lot of shit that I don't know and like we don't know. And a lot of these people like on Instagram, these pages that are posting these things, like they're so informative and so good, but a lot of people begin to rely on them to like teach you the stuff that like you're not even paying them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not even a service, and people kind of just see it as that in a way, like, which isn't bad. I'm not saying it's bad, because it's like kind of the whole thing that we're even about. Like, we want to make a podcast, and the posts that we make on Instagram and things like that is just to like get things that we think are important out there and like say our piece or whatever. But again, sorry to keep going on about this conversation that we're like, it's a whole different conversation, but back to what you were saying about how we haven't experienced sexual assault or whatever. I was like I was scrolling through TikTok, and I kind of just started like I saw one of those like put a finger down thingies, and it was like a girl just being like, not me thinking I'm not one of the 3%, which is like me kind of this whole time being like, you know how it's the like 97% of women have been is sexually harassed at some point in their life, and me this whole time I've been like, yeah, I'm not one of the 3%, like obviously like I'm so lucky, and like it's such a sad statistic, but like this whole time I just kind of feel like I don't know what to say in this conversation, because I don't want to like I don't know, it's like it's a hard thing. Like I kind of want to give space to those, like I'm so outraged about it obviously, and we talk about it all the time, and it's like minute issues, but this kind of like the put a finger down thing, it was like all these things that like literally everything I was like, oh yeah, that's happened to me, that's happened to me, that's happened to me.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's kind of what I think is like important in this conversation, even like bringing to light all these things. And we were saying yesterday, like bringing to light all these things that everyone's just been like, oh yeah, that's just the way it is, or like, oh yeah, that's just like cool, or whatever, and
because you're so used to it.
Yeah, and it's until now that it's like people are kind of like, oh shit, yeah, that's kind of fucked up. Like in a way it's obviously scary. You don't want to be like thinking something's bad when you didn't inherently think that in the first place, you know what I mean? Like it's in a way scary, like thinking that there's all this like danger if you weren't even aware of it initially, or like all these instances that could be like now traumatic when you like look back, when in the moment it was just like all fun or whatever, like realizing all these things. But I think like that's so important, and also for men to hear all that shit, and like for women to acknowledge all that shit, and for everyone to be acknowledging it. Like I think that's cool about what's happening right now. And like I think it's really, really important.
Yeah. Kind of building on what you said, that I think a lot of women kind of amongst themselves will, because we talk about this all the time, a lot of women amongst themselves will kind of acknowledge something happened to them and it didn't feel right, or it felt a bit off, but it's not something that you would necessarily report to anyone. It's just stuff that you put up with, and you would acknowledge it to your friends, and you're like, yeah, how fucked up is that? But you're not gonna like post about it on Instagram. Whereas I think now that is more what we're seeing, and that means obviously that men and people who don't experience it are seeing all these voices, and I think that's why it's so important to kind of share your stories as much as you feel like you feel comfortable doing that, and as much as you know you think you can contribute to the conversation.
For sure. Also hearing all these stories from like things that have happened to girls that I know that I didn't even know about, and or even that I did know about, like things that I even observed, and in the moment it was kind of like laughed off, or like, oh whatever, you know, I don't know, it just wasn't like a huge deal in the moment. Hearing those stories now and sort of like what they have to say about it now, and even like reflecting on, I guess, stuff that's happened to me, or like things that my friends have told me, or things like that, I'm kind of like, oh wow, like even I was like, I didn't realize how fucked that was, and like how much it even affects, like I'm a woman and like I'm a girl and things like this happen to me, but like I feel like I don't even realize how much it actually affects people, and like how much it even potentially like things have affected me that I've just brushed off, you know what I mean? Because it's so like fucking innate in every like and we say it all the time with everything, like it's so inherent, it's fucked up, but at least like people are talking about it. So anyway,
Yeah. I guess one example that I can think of would be like you're having sex with someone consensually and it's all fine, but then they do something that you haven't given consent for in and it's just like a small thing that happens and then you're like, oh, what are you doing? Or you kind of just let it happen because you don't really know what to say and you're like, oh yeah, it's fine, it's just like part of the flow of having sex, I guess. But then you think about it afterwards and you're like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. And I think kind of what you were saying is I feel like we have both told each other instances of stuff that has happened like that to us and we're just kind of like, oh yeah, that was so fucked up. But then in the midst of this whole conversation that's going on now, and even conversations that have been happening, you know, the past year or so that I've seen on social media, is coming to that realization that, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't such a small thing. Maybe that was like more fucked up than we kind of thought it was in the moment. And I think that's something that like all girls will be able to relate to, is you're having sex with someone and then they do like one thing that is kind of something you haven't discussed beforehand, or they haven't asked you in the moment if it's okay, and you just kind of go along with it.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but like, remember, like a few times that I've had sex with guys, they'll just like, it will like slip in my ass or whatever, and it's just like, oh fuck, like wrong hole, ha ha ha. And then like I remember talking to a guy friend about it, or someone about it, like a guy about it, and they were like, yeah, that's just not an accident, like it's just not that easy to do that accidentally. And I was like, what the fuck? And like I kind of just like, oh, that's like whatever, like that's so fucked, or like that's kind of weird, like that's kind of funny, ha ha ha. Not even funny, like I don't find that funny, obviously. Like just kind of like, oh, whatever, like I didn't know guys did that, like that's so weird. But it's like I've never even like confronted anyone about it. I would never even like bring it up.
You wouldn't
like
get up and be like, okay, bye, because that happens. You just carry on.
Yeah, and like it's, you feel so like, not even like I've never had that moment that I feel paralyzed, I guess. Like I haven't had that moment, but you kind of do feel like there's nothing I can do now, you know what I mean? Like, and okay, like another thing I remembered is like when this one guy, like he just kind of really didn't treat me very well, and like he did something that was like really fucked up, and I was like, I recognized that, I was like, oh, that's fucked up. He basically like, we had sex one night, and then the next day he kind of like came into my room and then like was like, oh, let's have sex. And I was like, no, not now. And then he was like, let's have sex. Like, let's have sex. And then he kept insisting until I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. And then after that, he was like, oh, by the way, like, let's not tell anyone about this. And I was like, okay, like, cool. You think you're so sick. Like, I'm not going to go around telling anyone anyway. But I was going to a prees, like, with him, late, like, that he was going to be at. And I go upstairs and he literally just like pretended like he didn't know me, like literally, because he was trying to pull this other girl, which I was like completely chill with. If he wants to like pull someone, like we want anything, you know what I mean? And he didn't have to be a dick. And like I felt like that was just a dickish thing to do, and he was just like being rude and like basically like treat, like I don't know, I just felt like used in a really fucking strange way. And I like talked to all my friends about it. I was like, yeah, he was such a dick, blah blah blah. I was quite vocal about it. And like when I got drunk, I remember I told him, I was like, oh yeah, you're such a dick, but I didn't really like, I don't know, I kind of wish that I just like said like, you can't really do this to girls or whatever. And like when they're in those moments, like I don't know, I feel like you don't feel like you can even say it to a guy sometimes. Like you feel like you don't want to like seem unchill, or like, you know, there's this whole narrative of like
don't offend the guy.
Yeah, and like I'm not super like, I wouldn't say that I'm like a super pick-me girl or whatever. I'm not like super like looking out to please guys, and I'm not super like quiet around guys, whatever. Like it's not really like that, but there is this kind of thing with like sometimes when like especially guys that you've had sex with, like it just feels like you can't really be honest when they've done something wrong, because even like, and the amount of times that I've like even defended shit that like that guy did to me or other guys, just being like, oh yeah, but like they didn't really like we weren't really anything, like they don't owe me anything, like they didn't
Just
really
make
mean
excuses
it,
for
like
them.
that's just the way it is, like guys don't really think about those things, blah blah blah. It's like, but why, like why do
They should
like
have to think
exactly,
about those
why do
things.
I have to just feel like shit and be like, oh, that's just the way it is, guys are dicks, instead of like being like, yo, that wasn't cool, or like him just not doing it in the fucking first place, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another thing is that, like, kind of going back to what you were saying about how he came into your room and he was like, oh, let's have sex, and you're like, no. Something that we talk a lot about amongst ourselves, and also something that I think really inspired the podcast in the first place, because I listened to this whole podcast series about it, is the feeling that girls have of being scared to say no, because you might just be saying no to that one thing, but then you're scared what that might lead to afterwards. And that's the thing, is you can say, like, say with the guy slipping it in your bum like by accident, you turn around and said no. It's like, it's not just saying no to that, it's then how is he then going to react to that, that's going to put you in more danger than if you just let that small thing pass.
Yeah.
And maybe it kind of like slowly accumulates and like fucks with you in the head over time, those small things, but it might not be as bad as if you turn around and say no and they get angry and like react badly, and you don't know what's going to happen. And those are all like things that girls have to think about. And I know for guys to listening to this, they might hear that and think, oh, but that's just like assuming, you know, like not all men are like that, just assuming that all guys are going to react badly. But we have to, for our own safety, assume that any guy could just snap like that and turn around and react badly, because you just never know when it's going to happen. And the fact that every girl has experienced something like that, something even as small as that, where they feel like they have to say yes just to like appease the guy, or not even say yes, just kind of go along with it, is such a testament to that. Like, we're not all just lying and making this up and being like, oh, but guys, we have to tiptoe around guys in case this happens. It's because we know what can happen, and we see very real cases of it in the news every single week of what happens when those situations go badly. So,
And even like to even like stop it before it even gets to the extreme of like fearing like for your safety, which is genuinely very real, but even like beyond that, it's like you feel like you can't say no, because then like repercussions after, like I'm talking more about like being gaslit, or like them, like then what are they gonna say to everyone, and like especially like in uni culture and school and things like that, it's like it's not just the like safety aspect, it's like, okay, well, what is gonna be said about me, like what is gonna be thought about me, like all these social pressures as well that they kind of like weaponize against you, and just for saying no. And like,
yeah, and it's such small things that you maybe wouldn't even notice, but guys do it like really under the radar, and that like kind of contributes to the whole gaslighting thing. It's like, oh, if you like don't tell everyone we've had sex, what does that mean? You're the one that came in here and tried to have sex with me. Like, what is going to happen if I tell people? It's like all these questions unanswered, you know?
Yeah.
And all of those like unanswered questions lead you to feel uncomfortable and anxious. And I also wanted to talk about the word no, kind of, because I think, as you said no to that guy, and we know that guys don't have respect for the word no. They don't know what it means. And I think to talk about even our relationships, the way that we have handled having sex with them is like, sometimes they want to have sex and we don't, and we say no, and then they think that you're just like being playful or whatever, but it is actually a thing that girls kind of will say no in this like more playful way and less forceful way to kind of soften the blow of saying no to the guy, because you don't want to hurt the guy's feelings, but in your head you're like very firm no. But then anyway, guys will just keep pushing it until you like say a yes because you're too scared to keep saying no. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but sexual coercion is such a big thing in everyone's sex lives. Like, it's not just something that happens rarely. Like, this happens on a very regular basis to people in relationships and people not in relationships. And actually, a girl who went to our school has started a petition to make sexual coercion a part of the sex education curriculum, which I think is very important, because it's definitely something that isn't covered. So maybe we can link that down below. If it might already have enough signatures, but if it doesn't, we'll link it anyway, because obviously it can never hurt. So yeah, I think sexual coercion isn't just like something on its own, it's something that contributes to the bigger picture of rape culture and any scale of sexual assault that you might experience. So I think it's important to kind of talk about even those like smaller things, like we were saying, that you would just normally kind of brush over and not really acknowledge as something that's so fucked up. But in the grander scale of things, if every single girl who's experienced something like that spoke out about it, which we are seeing more like this week and the past couple of weeks, then maybe it would change the conversation. And yeah, there are so many guys out there who are just like, this is like an overreaction and this is over the top, but it's not. It's literally just girls telling their experiences of stuff that you've done to us. So if you don't want us to speak about it, maybe don't do it in the first place.
Yeah, that's another thing, like maybe if everyone just fucking starts like telling their stories, guys will just be like, it will flip, like guys will just be so scared of doing it, they'll fucking stop doing it, because then it's so
and it's also like it's so annoying, because I saw this tweet as well from a celebrity of like, we don't want to fearmonger guys, and like the response to the whole Me Too movement as well was, oh, you don't know what it's like to be a guy now, we're so scared to do anything. And it's like, well then educate yourself on what's right to do. It's not like you can never ask a girl for her number or never touch a girl, but how do you know the right signs to do that? How do you ask for consent to do that? Like, you can't just go about your life not doing any of that because you're so scared you're gonna get accused of being a rapist. Like, we're not just spurting random shit out to ruin people's lives. Like, I don't understand the logic.
I also don't even get how it's so life-changing to be like, just please don't sexually harass us. Like, how is that going to change your life? Like, how is that so hard to implement into your life? Like, it's so ridiculous.
Oh my god. But I guess to kind of speak more on the whole sharing your story thing, another thing I wanted to say was that there is so much happening on social media right now. Like, it is overwhelming, the amount of stuff. And we were kind of talking about this yesterday, the fatigue we get of like having to teach people how to treat other people, not just for women, for for the Asian violence that's happening in America at the moment, and of course like all the police violence that was happening last year as well. And it's okay to get exhausted by it, I think, is what I want to say. And it's okay to not want to get involved in the conversation because you don't really know how your voice is going to contribute to it, or you're just not ready, It's okay to not be ready to share your experiences with those things, especially stuff like sexual assault or sexual coercion. Just because everyone's doing it on social media, get so worried that people are going to feel like they have to share their stories because they think it's going to help the greater good. And yeah, it might help the greater good, but this moment now isn't the only moment that you can share that story. Like, this needs to be a continuing conversation for it to have any larger impacts. And this might be like the catalyst, but it's okay to take your time and really think about it and then share your story. Like, even 6 months down the line, it's always helpful to share your story, but that doesn't mean just because like now is the time to do it that you have to do it. And I really just want to stress that to people. Like, talk to people that you feel safe talking to about it, not just sending it out into like the realm of social media, because I don't know how necessarily helpful that is to someone who maybe isn't ready to do that, because it's hard to like filter out what you're going to receive back from social media if you put that into the world.
Yeah, and like I can imagine the internet is a kind of scary place right now for like it can be like it could be so triggering for so many people at the moment, and like, or not even triggering, like it could just be a lot. So I don't know, loads of people have been saying like, if you need to take an Instagram break and all of those things, like, you know, it's not that dramatic, but like if you just don't look at it, if it's like causing you pain, just turn it off for a few days. Like, as sad as this is to say, like in a few days it will die down and things will go back to normal. So like, look after yourself.
But even maybe if, I think as well, if everyone wasn't contributing right now, like so intensely, I think it wouldn't burn out so quickly. So I think that's something to consider as well, as, you know, maybe we can pace ourselves. And it's as important as it is to share people's stories, as we stress all the time on the podcast, and as important as it is to put energy into this, because clearly things haven't changed sufficiently. So we're back at this position again. It's okay to like take a step out and be like, okay, for me right now this is not something that I need, especially with the pandemic. Like, it's just a lot, it's so much, and I get exhausted by looking at it. I just want to like watch something that will like completely take my mind off everything, and you can come back to it at a later date if you know that it's important to you, and you know where to go. Like, there's so many resources, and maybe we can kind of try and put something together of different resources that we think are doing a really good job in educating people online and stuff.
Yeah.
But also I think we do want to have another episode and talk to someone who is willing to talk to us about their experience with sexual assault, and I think it would be valuable to hear from someone who's actually experienced it. And as we said, you know, we can only really speak to our own experiences and stuff that we know that so many other girls experience too. So we promise there will be more stuff on this down the line. But yeah, we kind of just wanted to say our bit for the time being, contribute to the conversation and acknowledge that it's happening, but also not like detract from the more important voices and the people who have actually experienced it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, wait, sorry, this is actually another thing I really wanted to say. Like, it's really opened my eyes, kind of like made me had to really look around at like the men in my life.
Yeah.
And like really be like, fucking hell, they're just not good enough. Like, they just are not doing what they have to be doing. Like, I can't, like, I have to, I don't know, it's like this whole thing of like, I don't want to feel like I have to make it better, but like, as people that like I care about, they need to do better, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, look at the men around you, like, you can't, I don't know, it's weird being like, it's weird to me being like on social media, all like, men are trash, and like talking about it on the podcast, like all these fucked up experiences, and then like go to my boyfriend and we're having this discussion about like, and he's just saying it's just not all men. Like, it's so annoying when you just like say like, oh, all men, blah blah blah, you know what I mean? And me having to sort of like break it down for him, and him still like resisting that, and like seeing it so like live and well, like in someone that I love, and it's like, I hope respects me, and I hope respects women, you know what I mean? Like, it's like a lot of fuckery in my head. Like, I don't know, it's not a nice feeling. Obviously, I'm not like, oh, poor me, like, but like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, looking at the men around me and being like, okay, we have to make them better.
Yeah,
and
or
like,
just don't be friends with them. As hard as that is.
yeah. Also, like, exactly, 100%. Like, don't be friends with misogynist, dickhead, like, people. Just don't.
Yeah, and I think people is like the perfect thing, because it can also be women as well. You know, we should be calling out
100%.
the other women in our lives that make excuses for people, and that internalized misogyny is a thing. You know, people will literally, like, I've heard women saying not all men, and they should examine where that comes from as well, and why they feel the need to say that, because anything that we have discussed and anything that anyone's putting into the world right now can as easily happen to them because they're women. So female solidarity and male solidarity, like, we need to all be together on this issue for anything to make any significant
100%.
change. So
Yeah.
and I want to send my support to anyone who's maybe experienced anything on any level. I mean, that is literally all women. So I want to send my love to all the women that are listening right now, and we know how exhausting it is to still be in this position and, you know, not really be seeing any change. And then also in the UK having our right to protest be taken away, and on top of that, all of the racism that's being played out constantly in front of us. And we want to just send our love to anyone who is affected by this, and we hope there's going to be some kind of change. I mean, misogyny was made a hate crime this week.
Oh, wow.
Good news, so that's good. And yeah, let's just keep calling people out and doing it in our own time and not rushing to do it, because now feels like the right time, because any time is as good as now, really. And obviously we want change to happen as quickly as we can, but, you know, it's been time tested and proven that it's not just going to suddenly happen. So
yeah.
And protect your female friends.
100%.
Make sure they get home safely. Don't leave them alone. Check in on them if they tell you stuff like, you know, anything we've really talked about today. And yeah.
Love you guys.
Yeah, we love you, and
we'll see you on Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll see you on Tuesday. We hope this was somewhat helpful, or, you know, you guys could relate to this in some way. Stay safe.
Bye.
You've been listening to Sextras, presented by Honey Jane Wyatt and Maria Jose Hayodatiyi. Produced by Mabel Productions.